This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and I did a report earlier this week on the recent string of cattle mutilation incidents happening in Oregon, and I decided to bring an expert to talk about them. He's written UFOs over New Mexico and UFOs over Colorado, maybe UFOs over Oregon in the future. Preston Dennett, who's also a member of MUFON and is a field investigator as well. This has been an interesting situation. I read this week the LA Times did a story on these cattle mutilations that have happened in Oregon, and that's a pretty big newspaper to be covering that.
Yeah, I'm not sure people even realize how long this has been going on since, at least the 1967, I think, were some of the early cases. And it's been going on ever since. It doesn't get a lot of publicity always, but certainly this is a phenomenon that is hitting our cattle industry really hard, the ranchers in particular.
Yes, I read those cattle were worth $7,000 each, or they were actually bulls, I guess, that were killed, 5 of them on that ranch.
Yeah, there's 4 main theories to account for this stuff. The first and most popular, initially at least, was predators, which is something virtually all investigators disagree with, and certainly the ranchers do, because what we're looking at here is not what you would see with a predator, which are lots of blood being spilled everywhere, rough wounds. What we're seeing is more like laser-like precision, almost as if cauterized. No blood. There's no tracks around these animals. There's lots of strange phenomena involved with this, including the appearance of black helicopters and UFOs. So it seems there's an element of government involved as well as extraterrestrials. And we still don't know. It's been let me see, since it really broke hard in 1975, sort of in Colorado and New Mexico, which is where the cattle industry is, and spread across the United States and the world. Not only cattle to different animals, but it's been going on ever since then, and has not been solved.
In Oregon, there's no traces of ATV tracks around the cattle, no tire tracks. No signs of ripping of the flesh. The cuts are precise. The blood seems to be completely drained, but you don't see it on the ground. And it looks like surgeries have been performed to take out certain parts of these cattle that you could just go to a slaughterhouse and get if you really wanted it. So what do you think is happening exactly, or some of the theories, and what could they be doing with these body parts that they're taking? Because they're leaving the rest of the animal unharmed, which is one of the reasons why people don't think it's predators. And I know the Oregon ones have been investigated by the police and other officials because of the seriousness of the value of the bulls.
Right. Yeah, that's where it gets really crazy. I have to be honest with you, it's very hard to understand because there are cases where there are cattle or horses or who are hit and have maybe an eye removed, and that's it, or a tongue. Generally speaking, the tongue is usually removed, the eyes, the ears is pretty common. The rectum will be cored out and the sexual organs are removed. And that's your typical case. In pretty much all of these cases, and this is an important distinction, animals, predators, do not go near them. Not even flies. I mean, there was a case in I believe it was Colorado, where a ranch was hit and they had a bull that was mutilated. And the closest the coyotes would get, there was a pack of hungry coyotes approaching us, was 25 feet. They circled around it. Nothing would touch this. So this is important, I think, because we have not discovered what it is that these animals are sensing. And it's all animals. It's all predators. It's down to insects. And this is very unusual because in areas like this where these are taking place, it normally fallen animal would be consumed immediately and overnight, and you have nothing but stripped bones, literally in 48 hours.
Yeah, because I heard that there's even a wolf problem in that area of Oregon, so that's an easy target if they died from some other cause. But to have, they said in a 24-hour period, 5 of the bulls were killed, so they were all within a quarter mile of each other, so that's no coincidence. And they ruled out poisoning. There was no signs of bullet
Right.
holes, so it's unusual for sure.
Well, yeah, and this is where it comes down to, one of the main theories as to who's causing this, which is extraterrestrials. It's clearly not Satanists or cultists. They just don't have the ability to do that. It's doubtfully our own government on its own, because that just doesn't really seem to make sense. It's too widely spread. It's across the world. But that would mean, all governments, really. And what we don't have is, these mutilations take place very quickly, without sound, in very harsh weather conditions sometimes, snowstorms and things like this. There was one case where a guy had just checked his cattle, went to bed. One of the cattle was pregnant, due to have her calf, and the next morning, the pregnant heifer was found mutilated. Her pregnant, embryo was missing. Later found that the baby had actually been born and was about 10 hours old, they estimate. So are guessing this mutilation happened right after this cow gave birth.
Wow.
It's just very strange. There's a number of these cases where there has been like crushed grass found or burn marks, and things like this, which would indicate, sort of landing traces from a UFO. So it's pretty clear aliens are doing it. We're not exactly sure why.
The other thing I wanted to mention is the authorities that have been investigating this have not ruled out aliens. They haven't said it's not extraterrestrials, which is something that a lot of authorities would rule out on record. So they're definitely keeping that as an official possibility. And I heard that in the 70s and 80s, when they had the big string of these, that the only thing authorities found was that it was happening from a common type of predator. So that was what the conclusion was, from what I understand. So the authorities are even kind of have their hands up in the air on this.
This is a pretty covered up area of UFO research. And I'm amazed to see some of these, new cases coming out in the LA Times and, certainly all over the internet. It's still going on, which to me speaks to this being sort of an ongoing project, where the ETs have a fascination with genetics. I have a feeling it somehow ties to that. What doesn't make sense to me is this very sort of particular choice of organs, eyeballs, and tongue, and the reproductive organs. Why is there this fascination with that? It just doesn't quite make sense. Most of these cases do not go reported. When it broke out, and really, I think the first case was 1967 with what was popularly known as Snippy the horse, whose name was actually Lady. Snippy was the mother. But there had been a rash of UFO sightings around, the Colorado area, Sand Dunes National Monument area, San Luis Valley. And at the same time, they found this horse, Lady, and she had clearly been dropped. They were able to trace her tracks till she was lifted in the air, dropped some 200 feet up late, in a different area, had been severely mutilated, brains taken out, all kinds of organs, and it was also landing traces in a number of areas, crushed bushes, radiation traces. So this was a very disturbing case, which really kind of heralded what was coming. And we still haven't solved. This is 1967. 1975, it broke out real bad. There was a ranch up in New Mexico that lost 47 head of cattle on one night.
Wow.
So that's pretty unusual. And here we have, sort of 2 or 3 cattle, 4 cattle, and some of these cattle fluoresce under a black light. This is a weird pattern. They've noticed weird little details here and there, but it's clear to me that these are aliens probably doing this for unknown reasons tied to genetics.
Do you think it's likely one species of aliens, or could it be various different ones doing that, or any theories on that?
There's a few scattered cases where people have seen grays involved with this. So I think they're probably implicated, as always, in most of the stuff. But no, we really don't know. While the UFO phenomenon is pretty much tied to this, there's a lot of cases. I'm going to say, at least 25, 30% are tied directly to UFO sightings, but often not. And black helicopters, that's another thing. Problem is, a lot of these black helicopters are silent. I mean, there's one case where a ranch had a helicopter land on their property, and then the mutilation happened the next day. So there's some indication that perhaps aliens and ETs are working together. We're observing this, we're allowing it, or in some respects are doing it. But ultimately, the ETs, I feel, are behind this. And yeah, I mean, it's still ongoing, which is what's blowing me away. I mean, don't they have what they need? Cannot they raise their own cattle? What is going on here? That means there must be something about our cattle, not theirs, that they're interested in.